This is ultimately the 7th installment to my Fandoms series, and in previous parts I have details of how I've been able to branch out and explore other things, since siding with the point of Doctor Who's steady decline into mediocrity. Not to mention that the very toxic nature of the fandom helped push me to do this even more. I never really did YouTube for any other reason than it was a hobby for me, not because of pressure or anything like that, and as such, and while I still wanted to do the channel, I just uploaded what I felt like, which ultimately showcased what I mentioned just now, while still staying within my previously established boundaries to some extent. Because of this, I did continue the core idea of Doctor Who videos, but had various tangents here and there in more recent years. Also, because of how my interests were evolving, I discovered many more brilliant TV shows, films and hobbies in general, which in turn led to me focusing and boiling down, quote unquote, Doctor Who being my favourite TV show, to one era of it. I did this so that it would be known as to which part of the vast show that I would be most likely to return to, because of it being so large, and also with the amount of other TV shows that I have been thoroughly enjoying, and also since there is one section that I have a massive passion for. Plus, I would even say that there are programs that are better than Doctor Who on the whole, but comparing them to it is in a ways unfair since that one is so large. Luckily, this section of the show has had great treatment throughout both the Chibnall era and the global pandemic era of the 21st century, despite myself still seeing the stupidity and horrible side of the fandom in this particular pocket of the show's universe, with perhaps the worst one being this review that was left on an Amazon listing for a release of Fury from the Deep before it even came out. The beloved programme started off in the years of black and white television, and clocked up 256 episodes across 6 seasons from 1963 to 1969. William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton were the two actors that played the two versions of the character that we saw during this time. Very much the concept of the show was pushed, stretched and tested within these 6 years. Early on in the run, we had a 3-hour historical epic in which our main characters were banded with the adventurer Marco Polo. Several stories overall with armoured aliens that were based off of the Nazis trying to take over the universe, ultimately resulting in some of the most epic sci-fi stories the show has ever seen. Not to mention how this section of the show ended with a 4-hour allegorical sci-fi war epic that expanded and developed the show even more, in turn paving the way for many years of adventures to come. To many enthusiasts of the show and sci-fi on the whole today, that may be an intriguing and exciting prospect of an array of stories. However, many unknowables may be saddened and surprised when one says that you can't even watch some of these episodes anymore, and possibly never ever be able to as they originally went out. The Lost Episodes of Doctor Who is a long and tragic story that has had several videos and various items made about them in the many years that they have existed. Out of all of the episodes produced during this period, 97 are currently not known to be preserved in the television archives. Whenever TV was produced during this time period, it was not often thought of being seen more than once, mainly because home media didn't exist yet. To keep costs down with the expensive technology the BBC was using as well, they reused the tapes for other programmes. Thankfully, many long thought gone episodes of programmes from the company have turned up over the years, including several of Doctor Who. Before erasing the master tapes, they were duplicated for overseas broadcast in other countries, and thanks to these duplicates we now have installments that would otherwise be gone. Searches for the missing episodes have yielded great results in the past as well, with 9 being found, making up an announcement made in time for the show's 50th anniversary. It varies wildly in terms of consistency of existent episodes in each season, as one may imagine. For example, in William Hartnell's first 2 sets of adventures, only 11 out of a total of 81 are missing, but with his third we can only watch 17 installments out of a total of 45. The Doctor Who DVD range is something that has gradually expanded over 2 decades now, with the 1999 release of the Five Doctors being its inception. It has effectively constructed a physical media catalogue for the hundreds upon hundreds of episodes of the show that have been produced overall, releasing and further preserving the history of the show. 2006 for this range, however, marked the beginning of an ongoing, but at this time perhaps an on-hold, effort, and something that has been a big seller in terms of Doctor Who releases, that being animated reconstructions of the lost episodes. Thanks to dedicated fans, as these original First Doctor and Second Doctor episodes were transmitted, audio recordings of them were made, including all of the currently missing 97. Utilising various methods, people have made reconstructions of these missing installments by pairing the audio tracks with a slideshow of sequenced existing imagery from the episodes. That, by all accounts, is quite a rudimentary way of putting it, but embellishments have been put on top of this basic formula, such as the Loose Cannon team, whom are well known for their Doctor Who reconstructions, visiting the original house using the evil of the Daleks to film sequences for their recon of the story. 2006, however, was a turning point for these versions of the stories. The Invasion was originally an 8-part story from Troughton's third season, with 6 episodes intact and 2 missing. Utilising the audio recordings of the missing first and fourth installments, fully animated reconstructions of these chapters were created in order for the story to have a DVD release. Other ideas of missing episode animations were suggested at the time. However, the only thing to surface back then was a cartoon of the singular episode Mission to the Unknown, with no physical home media release as of yet. Eventually in 2013 and 2014, The Reign of Terror, The 10th Planet, The Moon Base and The Ice Warriors all had DVD releases following the previously established formula of having a small amount of episodes to be animated, with The Web of Fear being announced having 4 of its missing episodes found, now making 5 of 6 to exist in 2013. Rumours circulated that it was being animated also. This, however, didn't happen until 2021, with a controversial 3D motion capture animation, which, if you couldn't tell by what I'm showing on screen, was interesting to say the very least. In 2016, and for its 50th anniversary, The Power of the Daleks was released on DVD with all 6 of its missing episodes animated. As this was exciting news for fans, sadly the products we got suffered from being rushed. Apparently it was under so much of a tight schedule to the point where a secondary colour animation of the story wasn't even finished and was only included as a bonus feature within the Blu-ray Steelbook of 2017. However, since 2016, more missing episode animations through various studios have surfaced, with Galaxy 4, an updated and improved version of The Power of the Daleks, The Macra Terror, The Faceless Ones, The Evil of the Daleks, The Abominable Snowmen, The Web of Fear, Fury from the Deep, and a 10-minute cut-down version of episode 1 of The Wheel in Space. For me, these releases have been a fantastic thing for the fandom in general, and have been great for the most part. There have been a few lesser moments here and there, such as the horrible animation of The Web of Fear episode 3 and the unusual reconstructions of Galaxy 4 and Fury from the Deep, both of which have had a common complaint that I can see where people are coming from with. I've personally never strove for accuracy in the various ways and reconstructions that I have been able to use to re-experience these almost 100 missing installments, as I've enjoyed almost all of them as their own thing and have had a good time with these often quality products. It will obviously come down to opinions as to which ones are good, but for me, I've been able to enjoy almost all of the lost episode animations that have been released recently. Power of the Daleks 2016 was okay for the time, but obviously very rushed and since improved, with the Web of Fear's unusual approach of 3D animation occasionally having passable but not exactly great backgrounds, but all the while having anything that was affected by motion being atrocious beyond words. As I hinted at earlier, both of these animations have had one complaint, that being the character proportions are odd to say the least. For a while when watching Galaxy 4, I found Vicky's long neck to be quite distracting, for example. For me, however, with this duo of animations, outside of the proportions and going by the point of how I've only watched these in black and white, I would have said that the animations are fine otherwise. Taking out of the equation the common complaint that I have since detailed, I feel that the characters themselves look like who they are supposed to be for the most part. Sure, they're not perfect replicas, as they can't be anyways, but I could easily believe that these are meant to be who they are from a visual standpoint. As well, for me, Galaxy 4 and Fury from the Deep are among the best stories from their respective Doctors, so whenever I get sucked into the story, the animation doesn't bother me that much. As long as it's watchable, unlike the Web of Fear, minor inaccuracies don't faze me. However blissful as this new era for my favourite section of television has been for me, the anchor that is the overlooming presence of the Doctor Who fandom has been there, and has spewed degeneracy and stupidity. I can understand people wanting accuracy with these animations, and that is fair enough. Some people are purists, and these animations that often take liberties to appeal to a modern day audience may not be for them, and that is 100% fine. However, what is not okay and not fair in my opinion is how far some people have gone in terms of what their expectations want and what they got. For example, with some of the missing episode animations, there have been the case of some of these stories having 1 or 2 installments that actually survive. In the case of the faceless ones, episodes 1 and 3 exist, with the other 4 of the 6 missing. For something like this, the animation company will animate all of the episodes, instead of skipping the existing ones and just doing what we don't have, which is mainly done for viewing consistency from what I can gather. Not to mention they would be expensive and daunting to colorise the existing episodes, as colour animations for these releases are also done. A clip of the animated episode 1 of this particular story was released onto YouTube by the official Doctor Who channel, if I remember right, and on it were comments that basically consisted of people whining about how they, quote unquote, didn't animate the episode properly, with one using the example of how Ben trips in the existing episode, and that this was not animated as a part of the cartoon version of the installment to prove their point. Whereas I could see how this creates inconsistencies with the surviving audio tracks, this ultimately spirals into 2 separate points for me, one a bit more obvious than the other. The first being that these consumers are not considering the fact that these projects have a budget, and that things that were present in the original episodes could be well outside of what the money will allow for one of these animations, which are in themselves a completely different medium. Perhaps the biggest example I can think of in terms of this point is the Macra Terror. In the first episode, the Doctor, Ben, Polly and Jamie are welcomed by colonists of the city and are given a general introduction to the place, being shown what they have and what commodities they use and possess. There is a scene in the transmitted version where the Doctor is subject to the colony's rough and tumble machine that was omitted from the animated representation because it was deemed to be too expensive to create, as it would have required different costumes and looks for the character. The second one here is the much longer one, but perhaps is what annoys me the most. I mentioned in my video titled The Doctor Who Fandom how I hate people needlessly comparing things whenever it comes to forming an opinion. The most exemplary instance of this fandom doing so is with these missing episode animations. As I said, being a purist and not finding these releases to be your taste is absolutely fine. However, was perhaps the most malice and unfair treatment of these missing episode animations is people who judge and criticise them purely on the grounds of how they line up with the originals. They don't give them a fair chance, and they only construct an opinion on them through how they are compared to the original installments. They seemingly don't even for a second think of how these releases are as their own things, in terms of what they are trying to do and what they logistically can and can't do. Picking Fury from the Deep as an example, this was an actor-performed television production that was transmitted as live action. It was then medium shifted into a narrated television soundtrack release after decades of its only UK transmission, and then using people that most likely hadn't seen the original episodes that only went off what little was left of the story visually, which includes no complete episodes for this case, and documentation-wise, i.e. scripts, it was given a new visual lease of life via an animated form, again a completely different medium. Part of what helps create the experience of a television production is the acting. If we were to go by the compact disc release of the story, we would only be able to judge the performances through an auditory fashion, in that we would only be able to see the quality of them in terms of how convincing the characters are in that sense. For an existing episode of 1960s Doctor Who, we'd be able to pair this with how the actors mannerised their characters through little details like movements of limbs or facial expressions. For these stories, all 256 episodes existed at one point, in a completely different visual style and medium. William Hartnell's depiction of the main character was very much an expressive performance, adding lots of inflections and different visual elements to his character, like the way his body contorts when speaking, how he gesticulates with his arms, and his very lively facial expressions. Say if one of these particular First Doctor moments was missing from the archives, and it had to be reproduced through the animated lens, would it be recreated perfectly? No. Even if these companies had Disney movie budgets, it would be impossible to visually recreate the missing episodes 100% accurately, mainly because of how the actors manneristically created their characters originally. Live action can be much more fluid than animations of this type as well. Striving for these to be frame-by-frame perfect re-representations of these episodes is ludicrous and extremely ungrateful in my opinion. As I mentioned, these animations have to take liberties in order to appeal to a modern-day audience. I saw one Amazon reviewer say that they want to watch the story fully animated even if there is an existing episode, because they're not a fan of the older production value aestheticals of a 50-year-old production like The Evil of the Daleks. And for similar reasons, I can see the appeal of having a colour animation for those who are not a fan of black and white productions, which is another good thing about these releases, as they appeal to every type of fan and taste of reconstruction, as photographic representations are included as well. I would also probably say the same thing if there were live action recreations of these episodes. I'd be all for a 3-hour live action movie adaptation of the Daleks Master Plan, but if that was ever going to happen, I would also be getting ready to have a good time finding the people not giving a fair chance humorous, because there would be people seemingly trying to hate it for the most inconceivable of reasons. What would be the point of putting something like this up against the original if you would only hate it? Why can't you just enjoy it for what it is, or would be in this case? They would only be trying to represent something that we may never ever see again. Just enjoy it and stop being pathetic. I can understand people making comparison videos to see what the general differences are between, say, an existing episode and an animated representation, to see how different they are, but using said comparisons to formulate your entire opinion on one of these animations is really stupid in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, I would much rather have all 97 episodes back in the archive personally, but I don't see how recreations in these animations can't be feasible alternate ways to experience these stories. I highly doubt that the creation of these was and or would be done out of vitriol and disrespect for the original era and episodes. Overall, I am thankful for what the BBC and these animation companies have done, as they have brought back stories that I and many others thought the fandom would never ever see again. Fury from the Deep is my favourite Doctor Who story of all time. As people that know me by now, and as I have shown on the channel in the past, I am a massive fan of horror, particularly of the supernatural kind. This particular story is not only extremely well done and realised, but it appeals to me on pretty much every front of my love of horror. In one of the middle episodes, when researching the menace of the weed in the TARDIS, the Doctor pulls out a book and finds that this creature has had reported sightings for centuries now, establishing this parasitic menace as a piece of folklore for the story. Not to mention the eerie sound of a heartbeat throughout the refinery, which makes me wonder if the writer of this serial was at all influenced and or inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. The truly chilling cliffhanger to episode 4 is also a fantastic highlight. Under the mask of this folklore and supernatural driven sci-fi horror story, its great acting and writing. Victoria Waterfield, a companion that departs from this story, helps transpire how horrifying the situation that they are in really is. Mr. Oak and Mr. Quill are chilling possessed husks that feature in this story, as well as being in one of the most terrifying clips of Doctor Who to ever be recorded. Not to mention the very well developed John Robson in this story, who goes through an incredible character arc in this story, a pretentious, no bullshit worker to a frightened, reformed man. This is simply one of the greatest Doctor Who stories of all time in my opinion, and my personal favourite. It's something that I thought I would never see in emotion form ever again, but thankfully I can now.